Good morning, good day.
How are you, Sam?
Well, on this 1st of June, 2021, I think I'm doing pretty great.
Yeah, I think I am too.
Yeah, what's the day? Is it your birthday?
It's not my birthday,
Okay.
no, thankfully.
Is
My
it...
March to 60 will have to wait. Or I guess it's continuous, but
Did you say a month to 60?
no, I'm March to 60. I'm 50.
I'm just joking.
I'm 50.
Yeah. I'm almost catching up to you. I'm going to be 50 in a year
I
and
don't
a
think
bit.
you'll ever catch up to me, unfortunately.
Well, if I tie a brick to your head and make you smoke cigarettes, I think I can
Oh,
catch
yeah,
up.
you could. You could age. I'm pretty sure I can age very well.
But today is actually a big important day in BC. We have an increase in our minimum wage.
Minimum wage is officially increased, and we are at $15.20.
That's right, and it's increased for everyone, including liquor servers.
Yes, liquor servers have always been at a lower rate. Subsidized, I guess the principle of the subsidy is the tipping component, and most servers are tipped well. I guess they get a bigger portion of the tips that go out there. And I guess that leads the way to our discussion, what we're going to have today about a living wage. We'll talk a little bit about tipping. We've got some really, really good guests on.
Pioneers in the industry.
And two of the industry specific people that we'll be talking with today have implemented a living wage program, done it slightly differently. So it'll be interesting to see the different takes on that.
Yeah.
And then our third guest is actually, running a living wage certification program. And she can speak to the hows and whys and the benefits of that. So I'm pretty excited about that. Do want to acknowledge I am wearing an orange shirt today in support of residential school survivors. Recently, there's in BC it was discovered there was 215 children bodies that were found. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that, and you can check out on our bread and butter collective.com social media feeds how you can support different charities and societies that are helping to support the residential school survivors. So I just wanted to address that.
Great. Thanks for doing that. That's really important.
Yes. So shall we get it kicked off?
Sure.
And our first guest, we've got first of three, is Paul Hatfield from Spinnakers. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Glad to see you guys are doing what you're doing. It's really important that people in the sector get together and talk to each other and share practices. It's cool. Very good. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks, Paul.
Thanks
and thank you for your, thank you for your leadership. I know it's been a long time. You've been in the industry a long time. We've been, we're up over 20 years now in Victoria hospitality. You're the pioneer of a lot of things in Victoria, all good. And it didn't surprise me that you're ahead of the game on the living wage program, but I find it inspiring that, you continue to lead the way in all those things.
I used to, whenever the minimum wage went up, do a calculation and go, oh my God, I need to find this much more money this year.
Yes.
How am I going to do it? And it was a regular thing. And I've got old files or spreadsheets that did the math and showed me what I had to accomplish. And when the pandemic hit, and we were shut down, I found myself on the top of a ladder out in Soup, pruning an apple tree. And I had this eureka. I thought, this is our opportunity to change some things. And there were a bunch of things that were simply systemic in the way the restaurant sector works. And as an architect, I never really quite understood why. And as an architect, much to the chagrin of, I'm sure a lot of those around me, I have this tendency to just question everything. Like, why are we doing this? Is there another way we can do this? So I just had this kind of epiphany. It was like, it's like Naomi Klein's shock doctrine time. and we can come back from this and reopen and reestablish ourselves. And we need to do some things differently. And so we opened up to do some takeout, and that was as much to maintain the connection between the farmers and consumers, that if we weren't buying, if we weren't capturing what they produced and using it, then they had no market.
That's right.
And we've had numerous incidents over the past few decades where we get to clearly understand the connectivity of all that we do, and the fact that we live in an amazing place in southern Vancouver Island, and there's all kinds of cool people out in our landscape doing neat things, and they are all part of the supply chain. So it's important to keep the supply chains healthy. It's important to come back and do some good things. And that was what really motivated people in our kitchen to come back early last spring. And at that time, everybody was still freaked out about the pandemic, not understanding what it was, what it did, what the implications were, other than we all had to go home for a while. So we invited people to come back, and we just said, hey, there's this progression of minimum wage increases coming. There's a livable wage in Victoria that's pegged at $19.35. So let's just call it $20, and we're just going to pay everybody $20 and up. And what we want, though, is we need to get rid of overlaps. We need people to come and treat this more like a full-time job. And we need to deal with less people, because it just takes way more resources to manage more people and try and keep everybody on the same page. So as people came back, we sat in a big circle and we talked about this. And one individual had been here for a very long time. When we were talking about how we all have to pitch in and we all have to do everything, she just said, I can't do that. And my response was, well, I guess this isn't the place for you anymore, if that's the way it's going to be. And ultimately she came around, and she's still here.
And how happy is she now, Paul? Or is she?
She's happy for the job. She's happy for the security. She's of an age where it's probably more difficult for her to be mobile than it is for younger people. We've had, quite frankly, a challenge recently. And it comes down to, I think, the disparity of the systems that we function within. So we asked everybody to get into a tip pool, and we debated the tip pool, the ins and outs of it and how it would work. And we ultimately came up with a formula that was acceptable to everybody. And it was really a recognition that there's more to life than showing up at 5:30 or 6 o'clock on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night and jumping in your section and working it for 4 or 5 hours and taking all the money and going home. That there's a lot of work that goes on to set the table. Right. There's a lot of people are involved behind the scenes, and they need to be part of the team. They need to be recognized. They need to be supported. They need to feel worthy of what they do. Because if they're not, then they're kind of second class. And there's no room for that anymore.
No, you've got
we need to all be on the same table.
Yeah, and you've got a really diverse employment right now, don't you? You've got a hotel room, you've got gardens to maintain, so you got indoor, outdoor employees, probably some janitorial staff, prep cooks, dishwashers. I mean, servers. You've got a whole slew of different skill sets, different jobs being done. That couldn't have been easy to make parity for everyone. and I'm not pointing you at you in particular because I know that Cliff also has a wide slew of people with wide talents that he needs to try to figure out how to make.
Well, I think it's
make
different
him
kind of
parody,
backgrounds
right?
too, and I think Paul touched on one issue with implementing a new system is what happens to those people that in the old days were walking away $300-400 a 4 or 5 hour shift, where they're making upwards of $100 an hour, and then the kitchen staff were relegated to the $15-16 an hour jobs and a small portion of the tip. And there's always that dichotomy between front of house and back of house, and everybody knows what everyone's making, which is, if you own a business and don't think that, then you're wrong. They all do. So I think it really creates a lot of animosity and inherent unfairness. And I think that's one thing that I know for our business when COVID hit, it was like, okay, we can't survive with the old model, even with the profitability standpoint. So as much as we need employee wages to go up and people need to make a career out of this industry, the businesses also need to be left with a little bit of change at the end of the day too.
It's got to be
Having
sustainable.
I've spoken to members of Paul's Kitchen because I was trying to gather stories on kind of what the impact of living wage means for workers.
Oh.
And one story that really struck me was someone who was living prior to Paul putting in the living wage policy. They were living in a shared house with people who were they were not respecting any COVID protocols. He was living in an overcrowded house. He was living with people who were going out and mixing with other people, and he couldn't really sleep that much at night because he was working, and people would be up until 2 a.m. but he couldn't, on the wage he was on prior to it, he couldn't afford to go and live elsewhere because rents in Victoria are so high. And then once Paul kind of instigated the policy, it meant that he could afford to move out. He could afford to, which actually also then helped Paul's business because he didn't come into the kitchen, he didn't get infected by a roommate and then come into the kitchen and then infect all the team there. And from the kind of the head chef sort of said that actually, and his mental health has just improved so much, and his focus on the job and his commitment and everything like that. And so while it is very, really difficult to kind of to go through all the detail about how do you implement it, I think it's also really important to always go back to those workers and the impact it can make on those workers for having that raise.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anastasia brings up a very good point. Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Oh, sorry.
I'm glad you jumped in. And yeah, let's talk about the living wage in general and what your mission is.
So I'm Anastasia. I'm the campaign organizer for the Living Wage for Families campaign. And we sort of have three purposes. We annually calculate what the living wage is for communities across British Columbia. And the living wage for Victoria at the moment is $19.39 an hour, as Paul said. We'll be calculating the next set of calculations in November. So stay tuned for what that could be. And then what we do is we certify those employers that do commit to pay not just their direct staff, but their contracted workers a living wage. We certify them. They can put our logo on their across their business on their website. We want to advertise as much to the world these businesses that are doing the right thing and are paying their staff a living wage, because that's how the movement grows. It's kind of businesses talking to businesses about the benefits it can bring. And then the third thing we do is we advocate for government policies that can lower the cost of living for families in BC, and also we push the government to make sure that the minimum wage will go up, and hopefully one day it will reach a living wage.
Wow. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's so far off from where it should be right now. Even today, on our final hurdle of this, I guess it's been 4 years of increases every June first in BC, and now we're the second highest in Canada for our minimum wage.
I think British Columbia might be the highest.
It's the highest now. Yeah, just now. It wasn't yesterday, but it is today, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, and I actually went back and looked at in 2011 the minimum wage in BC was $8.75, according to Google.
Wow.
And the one thing I look at is, okay, what is the inflation rate over that period as well? So what is the buying power of minimum wage in 2011 versus buying power of minimum wage today? And thankfully, based on, I believe it was like 1.75% annualized inflation, that would equal $10.32. So now being at 15.20 or 15.20, it's significantly larger buying power. It's almost a
Right.
third buying power versus minimum wage there, because I think it's one thing to say that minimum wages are climbing, but what's the buying power of that money versus historic buying power? I think that's a key.
And I mean, the BC government have done a great job. When a few years ago, BC had the lowest minimum wage in the country, and so the fact that they've gone over 5 years from having the lowest in the country to the highest in the country is great news. However, there is still a $4 an hour gap for those workers in places like Victoria and Vancouver, which are some of the most expensive places in the country to live. There's still a $4 an hour gap between what you need to be earning to actually be able to make ends meet, to afford to pay for rent and pay for groceries and do all that. And if you think about that, $4 an hour is sort of about 20%, and that's almost a day a week extra you have to work at minimum wage in order to be able to afford to make ends meet.
So that's overtime, that's working on Saturdays, it's missing your family, it's all kinds of implications. Can I get you to tell us how the living wage is calculated in terms of, I know it's based on a family of two with two children, but can you kind of talk us through what that means?
We partner with local communities to calculate local living wage costs. And we take some data that is available nationally, and then we have some data where we have to work out, for example, the cost of childcare. We have to contact all the childcare providers in an area to kind of work out what the average cost of childcare is. So we've got a kind of formula which takes into account rent, it takes into account food, it takes into account childcare, transportation, the real basics that a family needs. This isn't international holidays. This isn't kind of glamorous things. This isn't even debt repayments. This is the real basics that a family of four needs. We picked the family of four as a model just because it is the most common family type in BC for those with children. We also know that for those individuals who live on their own, there have been quite a lot of investments in recent years to help reduce the cost of living for families with children, which is great. Things like in the future, when the $10 a day childcare comes in, there's the child opportunity benefit. There's a lot of things that have been brought in recent years to help families with children. And so we are going to be looking to see if actually it might be more expensive to be an individual living on your own than a family. But we also know that children, we're not sending them out to work. they cost a lot of money to raise. And
when are we going to do that again? No, just kidding.
I've got 3 kids.
So that's why we use the family of four type. But our kind of research shows that actually it works out pretty similar, whether we're talking about a family or we're talking about an individual. But we just pick the family of four as that kind of basis to go on. And the assumption is that both parents are going to be working full time, which doesn't allow any time off to look after children and to do that kind of stuff. So it really is it's quite a conservative calculation.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make. The other thing I just want to go back on a little bit is obviously living wages aren't the same in every community. I know looking at the provincial, graph, like if you were in Kamloops, for example, I think it's like just over $16.50 an hour. So getting to the $15.20 minimum wage affects different communities. We're closer to closing that gap on living wages in certain communities, but further apart in bigger cities. And the key thing, that the 20% difference between what the minimum wage is and what a living wage is, that should be what your living costs are of your total gross, close to. I mean, I think the average is probably around 30% or 35% of your wages go to pay for your living, whether you're mortgaged or renting or what have you. So it's that disparity in Vancouver and Victoria is a pretty big one when it comes to paying your bills and not requiring you to live in common housing and communal housing, where obviously it's not as pleasant. You don't have as much privacy, and when eras of COVID and health orders, it kind of creates a situation where you're not going to maybe feel safe, and I think help spread disease, which is not good in this day and age. But okay, let's go to Cliff Lear. And Cliff from Philippi and Agrius, he right out of the gate made some changes and basically went to a living wage, removed tips altogether. So didn't even give that, didn't wait, just went for it. So how has that gone for you, Cliff?
It's proven to be far more complex than I thought. And some of it ties into stuff we've been working on for years with sustainability and like where we source our ingredients and making sure we're getting, mostly local things that we are getting from far away, getting fair trade, and, But I think in recent years, as the cost of living has gone up, and being in touch, with a lot of people that are, even at we've always been like, better than average, but realizing over the last couple of years that even better than average is still running quite short of what people are needing to live.
Mm-hmm.
And, kind of similar to Paul there, it was really interesting. I've been trying to stay in touch with people. I haven't talked to Paul at all, and very similar kind of timeline as him, is like when this happened. We didn't close. Our staff cut way back, but we kind of kept rolling through the whole thing. But it was, maybe like a month or two after, kind of into like April, May, when we're restructuring and hiring more people back on, and realizing, this is the time to just do all the things that, we really want to do, and either we're going to make it or we're not. But it was the time to go for it. And so yeah, we started people at $20, moved to everyone up to $20 as the starting wage. And then, my operation isn't as complex as Paul's there, but having all the other staff and needing everyone's position to be kind of relative, because yes, everybody ultimately talks, and even though we don't put everyone's wages out for everyone to see, like looking at it, it should be objectively fair, for how long people have spent time there, where people are starting at. And we had to raise our prices like 20 to 25%, which, for years we've been like barely making ends meet. And, myself coming from a generation when, I grew up, well, I started into the workforce baking, and was okay not earning much money. And, I realized like how much I worked, and, like falling asleep reading my kids' stories when I got home, and the whole story of it. But as I'm working less and more managing a company, needing it to be a sustainable lifestyle for people, our big commitment is to organic growing methods and sustainability that comes with that for the planet and health and all these other things. But we realize like the health of our employees is also, that's the foundation of everything we do. So, and that especially where Victoria's at right now, that, even $15 an hour really doesn't do it. And, then also from a business point of view, we're trying to be strategic so that we create, a healthier environment for people to work in, that, yeah, if people are sick, they can take a day off without having to worry whether they're going to make their rent or not. So that, creates a healthier work environment. And since we've done that, people are working, like we also had a lot of people working, 50 hours a week on average. And a lot of us are like, we enjoy what we're doing and are engaged in what we're doing. But also when forced to work more like 35 to 40 hours a week, and not having to worry about just like paying basics, people are living healthier lives and coming into work like more inspired, more positive. And I think there's a lot of value in that as well, that is part of this equation.
How did I think all those are great points. How did it affect your profit and loss statement? As far as like, was there, even though I know you raised your prices, did you notice on balance your profit was similar, or did you notice a short term?
Weird year to calculate it, and having the wage subsidy is a big part of the year. We don't even know what our average. Now
Yeah.
we're looking where we're going to end up in the next couple of months as things return to normal. Our wages have been averaging about 50%, which anybody who runs a business knows it's very high for our sector.
Wow.
But before we were running at 40% on average, and that was also tough to make work. And I think that's the thing, and like we're wanting to use quality ingredients, pay our staff well, and not go broke doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the toughest part of the equation. So it has forced us to look at because we're also trying to like keep food accessible to people. That's the other thing is we want, both from a business viability point of view and then like from an ethical point of view, we want good food to still be available for people.
I guess the point being, because obviously Agrius is a more full service restaurant, that
Yes.
probably would require, has been more effective with recent shutdowns and with in-room dining. I know with our experience with Zambri's, our labor costs has pushed that too. So hopefully as you get...
Yes, it should. That's the theory, is that it should be, as it gets busier, it offsets that. And I think we'll be in the right kind of zone. Part of it we realized, and servers are the trickiest part of the equation, because everyone else is getting paid kind of better than they were before.
Yeah.
But servers, servers were working that out, but kind of in a range of like $24 to $28 an hour. That's a very decent paying job.
Yeah.
Still quite a bit less than what servers would have been, and especially coming out of this, I think people will be tipping well. And we've been, I personally am quite torn on this, because I love a system where people are able to like make a decent living.
Yeah.
But the problematic part of it is then when it's unbalanced in, you see a whole team of people that are all working really hard. And when one area is getting paid a lot more than others, it creates all sorts of problems within the business. Then there's also, issues of inherent like sexism and racism that end up by being purveyed, through these systems. And so that's, why in the end we decided, we're just going to, pay people a good wage, and it'll be a different kind of person, I think, than what would normally serve. Perhaps it'll be people that are more attracted by lifestyle, that they're working with, with a respected group of people, that they have respect in the workplace, and can hopefully have like a good lifestyle, that they're, working with local ingredients, serving food, and, the guest experience. The guests are also there, stoked to be there and appreciating the service that they're getting.
Yeah.
That kind of like part of the equation of tipping. And it is very deeply ingrained in our culture. And I'm not saying that it necessarily is all wrong and has to go. This is just, our approach to trying to make the best of it. And, we should do another one in a year. Like now we're a year into the living wage, and so it's gone very well. But the next year, I think, will be far more telling, like how, if we're still viable as a business, and, how happy staff are and how happy guests are.
Yeah, I think you'll get a real sense of, kind of real world comparisons like that are COVID removed. I know COVID obviously has brought some interesting challenges. I love the fact that you took that bold step. I think, and just like Paul took the bold step, I think it's going to require big, bold steps. And there will be a transition. What's that?
The year of big, bold steps on so many fronts. Like everything's coming to the surface. Like the systems that we take for granted and have been working and living in, there's fundamental flaws in capitalism and, late stage colonialism and all these things. And really it's like, well, we have to face these things. And as business owners, we can't always wait for policies to come through. Like, even with minimum wage going up, yes, but that doesn't necessarily reflect where we're living right now. And, people are having to pay, rent, and there's no controls in for rent. So, we need to make sure that our staff are getting paid enough to live.
I think there's no question about that, for sure. Anastasia, Georgia?
I also think that with Cliff and Paul, and when they put on their business, and whether they put it on the receipt or whether they put it as signs on the building, or however they want to advertise the fact that they're paying their staff a living wage, that helps them grow the conversation with customers, with others that come in. And I think it begins to kind of change the system and change the norms that people can expect. And I know from our perspective at the campaign, we thought that, COVID's not really the time to be talking to employers about paying a living wage, because as much as we know, as COVID showed for workers why earning a living wage is so important for their lives, in terms of having to live safely and not have to work multiple jobs and more points of putting themselves at risk. But we thought, for businesses and organizations, we know they're struggling. We know it's a really, really tough time. But what we've been so pleased to see is that the amount of employers that are coming to us voluntarily saying they've had the kind of revelations that Paul and Cliff have had, it's incredible. We normally certify, before the pandemic, we would certify about 30 organizations a year. Already 5 months into the year, we've certified 50. So we've already certified nearly twice as many organizations in 6 months than we have we were doing an entire year. And that's because I think businesses like Paul and Cliff are saying, they realize the value of their staff and they need to kind of change systems and change the way it is. So hopefully there will be some kind of positive change that comes out of the pandemic with this.
Well, in terms of a business standpoint, I know before COVID, it was so hard to keep employees. They could go to in the business I'm in, the coffee business, people could just go to the next coffee shop and get a job and work not as hard for 10 cents more. And that was becoming a real issue, and it was hard to find qualified employees. So I'm hoping that by people being paid an appropriate amount of money, that'll keep them in their jobs, and the turnover will go down, and staff retention will go up. And
Well, I think it's like anything, you've got to build it before they'll come. There will be a transformative point where the rubber will hit the road, and in Cliff's case, where his labor is approaching 50%, where it should be closer to 30. That's a bit of a scary cliff to be standing on. But what has your experience been, Paul, with your labor percentages, and just from the business standpoint of your living wage program?
It's entirely a function of volume.
Yeah.
So, in recognition that people come to work because ultimately they need the job, they've got commitments, whether they've got a car loan or a condo loan or whatever, they need a steady supply of income. So our biggest challenge has been trying to figure out what to do with people when it rains and when it's windy and it's cold and they can't get outside. We are super fortunate that we have a large building, and we have 5 patios around this thing. And so last weekend, for example, on allowing people to come back inside, on Friday we did 85% of the same volume that we did on the same day in 2019.
Wow.
And I ran the same percentage labor cost as I did back in 2019. On Saturday, we were 97% of last year's or 2 years ago's volume. And we beat the labor cost. So we've got less people doing more. And
they're making
by volume, they're making more on top of what they're getting paid out of a tip pool. Front of house are pulling in another $10-12 an hour. So the way we've put it to people is, step back, take a deep breath, look around, and what professions do you get into, and how much education and training do you have to be guaranteed making $32 an hour when you show up for work? And we want you to stay for a full shift. We're not wanting you to come in for 4 or 5 hours. And one of the conversations that really struck me was a year ago, when there was a CBC interview with an individual in Victoria who was a self-described early childhood educator. And she was ecstatic. She was feeling so supportive because the province had just put the wage up to $18 an hour.
Wow.
And these are people taking care of our kids.
Yeah.
And so the message turning around to everybody here is that, hey, you're doing way better than that. You've got security. And, at the end of the day, you've got no liabilities because this is all the deductions are taken care of.
So when you tip pool, you put that rate on their checks?
Well, yeah, we are by definition in a distributed tip pool.
Yeah.
95% of what comes through our doors comes on credit cards.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no way that we can, set somebody up at a desk with a couple of armbands, a monocle, and dole out cash to people as they're leaving to go to the bar late at night. It's just like, it cannot be done. And that's the dilemma that we have today, is because we are confronted by those who function in the old school system.
Yeah.
Where the top ranking servers walk with all the money. So our place is remarkably stable. Baccala House, the stores are stable. Our retail activity is stable. Our housekeeping, janitorial staff is stable. All of my challenges are what would be called servers. at this
Servers,
point.
that's right.
And it's just because they can walk down the street, and they're typically going to 2 or 3 places in town right now where they get to keep all the money.
Yeah.
And one guy just said to me, I need the money, and the hit is too big, but I really want to stay here. So can I go there for 5 days and come back here for 2? And I just said, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work, because everybody here already knows what you walked with at the other pub the other night.
Yeah.
And that's just going to create discontent amongst everybody.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, is the challenge that we need to figure out. And I think it's something that we need to address as a community. And I've absolutely said to people when they came back in the door that if you have not been setting money aside, you need to.
Yeah.
Because it's way too easy to audit people like us.
Yeah.
It's way too easy to see what the average server takes per shift, per hour, based on gross volume. We had, like in 2019, over $900,000 passed through here in tips.
Yeah, that's
That's
an insane
like
amount of money.
And so I just say to people, government has been really generous and really supportive of us through this period. And at the end of the day, they need the money back.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to earn it. And we all need to properly contribute. And I would say that like 60% of the front of house staff are okay with that. But we've got this little revolving door thing happening again right now, where people are just going to the big money jobs.
But I also imagine, having spoken to some of Paul's kitchen staff, and you guys obviously know a lot more about the hospitality industry than I do, but the revolving door traditionally is in the kitchens. It's in the back staff areas, because that's where people aren't earning much money. And I was speaking to someone in Paul's kitchen who had previously worked, they'd usually work in a kitchen for about a month or 2 at a time, and then they get fed up because they were not earning enough money, and they were very stressed, and they were getting shouted at, and it wasn't an enjoyable place to work. And they worked in a year, they'd work in 3 or 4 different kitchens, and they started at Spinnakers. And because they're earning a living wage, and it's a nicer environment because everyone like puts in together and they all work together, and the way they were explaining it to me, that they're like, I want to work at Spinnakers while I'm living in Victoria, and this is where I want to keep being. So while there might be a bit of a few creases to work out with servers at the moment, and it also is important to acknowledge that for servers, they're, because of COVID, having to step up and do a lot more than they've ever done before in terms of trying to police people to make sure people are wearing masks, extra cleaning responsibilities. It isn't, servers are doing really well in terms of tips, but it isn't like what it was in the before times. So although it might be difficult at the moment and kind of trying to iron out the creases for servers, there is still earning the living wage kind of stuff really helps other areas which have traditionally been quite problematic.
Well,
yeah, that's 100%. It's the Baccala House, I think, are doing very well, and they're very stable, and they're very satisfied. Our conversations with them are, we need to see you running as fast as some of the front of house staff are when it gets really busy.
Yeah, that productivity gain needs to happen.
You need to pick up a plate, and you need to walk through the restaurant, and you need to put it on somebody's table, and you need to help out. You need to be seen to be part of the play.
Yeah.
And so we're getting much greater engagement with all people, and that's a super positive thing. If it wasn't for the ability of the potentially top earning servers to take flight, this whole thing would be a cakewalk for us.
I think over time that may prove to be okay too, as people get used to the new reality.
Yeah. It's just very difficult on the people that are trying to schedule.
Yeah.
And when we have a place that's as large as ours, if we have a rainy day and nobody shows up, then we can easily run 150% labor cost.
Yeah,
that's just the way it is.
Yeah, the swings are huge.
And I learned long time ago I live on percentages. So, you know, as Cliff is mentioning with what's happening with his labor percentages, I live on labor percents, I live on cost of sales percents. And, you know, as soon as I could figure out how to run a spreadsheet, I could figure out how to navigate what we needed to be able to do. And as I said, I think it, you know, it really comes at the end of the day down to predictable volumes and being able to set margins.
Yeah.
And have great product that people are happy to get. And certainly what we see right now is that the public is got this just absolute craving to get out, to hang out with each other, to socialize. And, you know, I think we're going to have a great summer. I am fascinated by the different interactions that happen in different parts of our place between the main floor and the top floor, and the gazebos in the parking lot and the picnic tables on the grass. I mean, they all function very, very differently, and people have their favorite spots, and the level of decorum just kind of vanished when the picnic tables showed up. People showed up with their dogs and their kids, and
oh, fantastic.
It's been really fun to watch. Yeah. And, you know, I think it's all a very, very positive scenario. It's just my individual challenge is trying to manage the people who are trying to be the team leaders front of house.
Right.
Just it's hard for them at the moment. But as was said, we'll get through this. And as we get through it, I think it becomes something that you know, others might want to have a closer look at. To me, it's the right thing to do, and I'm 100% happy that we've gone this route.
Yeah, I mean, I think that endorsement alone is worth forcing businesses to have a look at it. I know, as we mentioned before, we're hoping to bring a living wage program to the Bread and Butter Collective. We've got upwards of 35 local hospitality businesses as well. We've got some from off island as well that have expressed the need and desire to collaborate. So hopefully, we'll end up being the norm, especially in Victoria, which I think, the tide lifts up all boats, which, the competitive nature of being able to jump from one pub to the next pub, or one Italian restaurant to the other, or a burger joint to another burger joint, or a coffee shop to a coffee shop, there'll be less incentives. And I think the other key thing with any of these types of big, bold moves is to share the vision with everybody. Get everybody on the same page of the whys and hows we're doing it, and the reasons, that we're doing it. So I think it's very Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's definitely helpful having like other groups be the voice for it, because when we're serving food, nobody wants to hear about how much everyone's getting paid and percentages and stuff like that. It's not sexy at all. And our businesses are really there. Really, we want people to just come in and enjoy. They're not interested in the economics of a restaurant. So having like other groups able to say that for us, I think is a huge help.
Yeah, well, no question.
Cliff, I think, and I don't know, by canceling out your tip policy and kind of taking that off of the plate, so to speak, how have your customers reacted to that? Because that, to me, feels like one of the biggest challenges in how you've gone about doing it is by dropping out the tips.
Yeah, so everyone's quite surprised, and we have like a little statement about it at the bottom of our menu, but we don't make a big fuss about it, and so people sometimes miss that, and then it still comes up when people to pay. Everyone in general, we have generally like a great clientele, and everyone's very supportive of that. I think a lot of people don't understand, they see it and see servers making a bunch more, and I think a lot of people still don't understand it's still like less than servers might be earning otherwise.
That's right.
And I think there is ingrained things where people do like to control their tip. They like that as a control point in service. Like they like to be able to have that, and that is part of what we don't like about it, is like entitlement that comes with tipping and things like that. And so sometimes people have like question that and you know are questioning like, oh well, will we get good service then if people are making tips, not sometimes understanding that you know we look for different forms of motivation with staff. Like we, you know, staff are trained and are held to like a very high service standard, and really that's why people are there. Like
Yeah,
they're there
professionals.
because they want to deliver great service with you know great ingredients and great food, and not have to deal with the you know expectation or dynamics that go along with tipping.
And lots of other industries, most other industries, and even within hospitality, there are lots of people who are working very hard and trying to do the best job they can, and tipping isn't a part of it. There are ways to kind of manage staff and teams and stuff like that. And I mean, I come from a culture where you're supposed to if something is amazing and someone goes out of their way, then you tip because of that. And I think that you still don't want to sort of take away from sort of trying to reward someone if they have gone above and beyond. But it's the weird way, it's the expectation. That is a bit, and all of the sexism and racism roots and stuff like that, it's just not, and the entitlement that comes with it's a wider issue. So it's an interesting debate.
So tell me, Anastasia, what, like, as far as the living wage certification process goes, so I understand that there's going to be a window, like a 6-month window for you to kind of implement the programs. Is it just one tier? Every single person that's employed needs to be making a living wage, not including any other benefits, or is benefits calculated in that? And how about if there's a hybrid system where you're paying living wage, but you're still accepting a tip component?
So with the tipping is kind of, we have that as a separate thing. For us, you need to be earning the living wage for the community, so 1950, 1935, not including tips. So I mean, so for Paul or staff at Spinnakers earn $20 an hour plus anything extra in tips and stuff. But that $20, and I'll go with 20 just because it's a round number, so easier to work with. That $20 doesn't just need to be take-home pay. If you offer additional benefits such as health and dental, if you offer paid sick leave, if you offer vacation above the statutory minimum, anything else that you offer kind of to help your staff, that can go into that calculation. And happy to work with employers. We've got a calculator that we can use to kind of create the value of that amount. But we don't include tips in it partly because of the kind of the sexist, racist, historical nature of tips, partly because we also believe that tips are paid from the customer to the employee, not from the employer to the employee. So what a customer wants to do, that's kind of, we don't want to sort of dictate that. So we're not saying that tips need to, it's kind of up to every business to decide how they want to manage it. And the other thing with tips is that it's not something that you can guarantee that income, because as Paul said, if it's a rainy day and there are no customers, if that wage is sort of propped up by tips, you're not making, you might not make as much money at all. So that's where the kind of the base wage needs to be a guaranteed income, that an employee knows that they're going to go to work and they're going to take home that amount of money, and it's not dependent on on other kind of conditions and stuff like that.
Right, that's, and if they ever can't work and have to go on EI, or there's a pandemic, then they get their full benefits, as opposed to based on, well, it wouldn't be based on their true pay with tips ever, because people don't claim their tips.
No, most people don't. I know there are some that do, and I think that's the other aspect of living wages in general. And I mean, if you're going to buy a house, if you're going to apply for any type of debt, whether it be for a car, they're all looking at your notice of assessment from your tax return. Right. So elevating that number will, greatly advance your potential to getting into the housing, even rental properties.
Absolutely. You can now afford to get a place on your own.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, perhaps. So, I mean, that's there's so many benefits to it. What does it cost for your organization? So I want to become a living wage employer. I'm going to contact you. Please set me up a system. Here's what I do.
And at the moment, it's a completely free system. So, so jump on board quite quickly.
What?
We are looking at this, and it is something that we might move to a more fee paying structure with. And if we do, we want to make sure that it's staggered so that small businesses pay less and non-profits would pay less than larger organizations. At the moment we are a very small organization. I'm working part-time. Plus, when you get certified with us, we give you sort of a plaque and lots of amazing recognition. At the moment, we kind of have a free system because we wanted to grow it and to get the word out there before we sort of introduced a fee structure. But
how do you cover your costs? Are you guys a society, or like how do you take donations? We're a
non-profit at the moment. At the moment, the funding comes from our kind of generous. We get some funding from the union movement. Van City Credit Union have been a big ally and supporter of ours for many years. They're one of our largest living wage employers and one of the earliest ones. So some of the funding comes from that, but we know that we need to kind of diversify moving forward so that we're not dependent on just one source. But at the moment, it's just me trying to do as much as possible. So at the moment, it's a free process to certify. If you've got any questions, then just get in touch. The website livingwageforfamilies.ca has most of the information you need, but there's also a telephone number on there. So if you've got any questions, just give me a call or an email.
Oh,
We'll get in touch after.
Sorry, yeah, Cliff.
I'll get in touch after.
Yeah, I think I am too. I know I'm going to be implementing a living wage program at both Zambries and Big Wheel Burger. Going to try to find the right sort of message. So I may be talking to you, Cliff, in the future as well, and Paul.
And I'd like to be talking to all three of you more and more, because I'm definitely doing it for 2% Jazz. I'm going to do it on July 1st. I've just kind of made up my mind that there has to be a date to do it. And I'm going to go.
Jeez,
and
you are a cowboy. What? But guess what? That's what Cliff did, and that's what Paul did,
exactly.
Right? So
it takes us individuals
just got to make the choice.
Just go in and do it. And I'm scared as hell to do this.
We got you, bro. We got you.
I have no idea if this is going to come out of my pay.
Listen.
I mean, I did some calculations, and it looks like it's coming out of my pay.
Of course it is. That's where until you figure it out. I mean, the thing about it is, when we decided to do carbon neutral business, before we had already been in the restaurant business 10 years, 11 years with Zambries, I had no idea if it was even possible. But, some of the big ideas you just do. I mean, I know living wages benefit the community, they benefit your staff, they'll increase productivity, they'll decrease turnover. So all those things alone, if they just do that and you manage your, like Paul says, your percentages, then, you can figure out a business program, business plan that works. And I mean, I know for our group, we've always paid more than minimum wage regardless. So this is not as big a bold move for our group, I don't think. But I also know that from my experience, just doing it, even when we added an auto gratuity to our bills at the beginning of COVID, that was our big bold move. And we had to, we approached our staff we'd match if they donated, we'd donate to match them to the foundation as well. And that could have broken things as well, but it's worked out. So I'm confident that doing it will make all the difference. So I'm in, man.
You can't make an omelet without breaking a couple of eggs.
You're going to break some eggs, and you're going to make some adjustments, and hopefully the community will see what your intentions and where your heart is. And I salute you all for your efforts in this, and thank you for taking the time today to tell us your story, and hopefully through the Bread and Butter Collective we'll greatly expand the living wage program for hospitality businesses in Victoria.
Hey, can I just add one more comment before you go?
Yes.
Please.
That one of the conversations that we've had and that we continue to have is with everybody understanding that whilst we have these pay scales, we need to be collectively doing things to earn the pay scales.
Yes.
We need to be making stuff that we can sell. We need to be creating revenue. So when it's not busy, it's not okay to just kind of hang out and put in your time. You actually need to do stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of an inclusion of everybody into what the finances of the business look like. It's a matter of having people take ownership of what they do. So, I would say that, in the same way that I'm looking at Legends Hall and I'm looking at this amazing tomato sauce from Zambries that's being sold over in the mainland. I mean, there's a value-added product that comes out of a kitchen who are creating an opportunity out of the resources that they have at hand. And I think that
fantastic point.
As we evolve, we're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. And we need to look at ourselves not just as food and beverage service to tables. It's like Cliff has done with Falepi, and that beside aggregates. It's a It's a really cool combination.
Yeah.
And I had years ago people coming and visiting and looking at what we do in terms of retail sales, because they thought it was just like so innovative. Well, we just have to grow those sales. And by doing that, we create value, we create return on the invested time that we put in, and we justify our positions and our wage rates. And that way it all makes sense.
Yeah, I think, Paul, like that is such a great point. And I think tying everybody into the big picture, as mentioned earlier, is important, and let them know, transparency in the financials and how it all operates is important, because I think if people understand the why, the how is a lot easier to do. And, and I think the value propositions for the customers as well. So, it's one thing to ask the customers to pay more and to change the way they think. We have to produce a good product, and, we have to stand by it. So it's tying in the customer's value, what they get, and the productivity gains and the added, revenue sources from doing retail and doing these other things. It's all encompassing, and but isn't that a great challenge, and what a great way to run your business and have everybody tied in. Yeah, it's very entrepreneurial.
I think people are more satisfied too when they are tied in with their business. They're not just
100%.
Someone sending 8 hours of their life out to somebody else. They're like involved in their community and in their workplace and the people they're working with. And
right.
Leads to greater job satisfaction as well.
Yeah, it's way more fun.
I know I keep going back to Paul's staff that I was talking to, but for them, with the value of why, and I think it comes back to, it costs a lot, obviously, to make sure that someone is earning a living wage, and I think that's a really vital part. But there's also other things that can be done that don't necessarily cost so much to make sure that it's a great place for someone to work, and why someone's also committed to working there. So for those staff who might have seen a pay squeeze because they see other people brought up to their rate, there are other things that can be done and introduced to make sure that they're kind of motivated and happy. So Paul's head chef said that they love working there because they really get to understand the supply chain and the sustainability elements, and there's a lot more kind of wider as part of their role that they love, and it's not just about kind of the chef and the cooking food, but there's a wider part of that business that they feel engaged with. So I guess as owners, you can look and seeing how you can kind of bring your team together, and things that don't necessarily cost much money but can make a difference on top of the living wage element.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah, what a great point.
Yeah, Paul, when you were saying that on the slow days, everyone needs to find something to do, do you find that that's happening on its own, or are you having to encourage people and direct people to do that, or is it by making them more part or more invested in the business, do they just take that up naturally?
No.
No,
because that's not the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what they were trained
change the culture,
to do.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it requires prodding.
Mm-hmm.
It requires reminding on an ongoing basis. It requires going in and just having conversations and making suggestions. And there are just so many cool opportunities to create cool stuff that people like, that they're happy to buy. And it's really a matter of, kind of unleashing the dogs. It's like let's go, let's get out there and make stuff, because that's why we're here. And when people are encouraged and given free latitude, I'm always amazed at what they come up with. And then it's 100%. A matter of us having to figure out, okay, well, that's really cool. Now we need to figure out how we're going to package this, how we're going to take it to market. And by doing so, we simply diversify our offerings. And, this whole thing that we do here that we've done for all these years is just, it's diversification out of control. We're constantly looking for new ways to create revenue, new things to play with. So, whether it's going from being a brewery to becoming a cidery to becoming a distillery, those are all fun things. We found that the alcohol business is kind of crowded, so we got into sodas and sparkling mineral waters,
which are fantastic, by the way.
I'm just blown away by the acceptance that the market is giving us, and in 5 months we are just so beyond expectations, that it's made up for what we've lost in craft beer, because that marketplace is very, very crowded now. So, one is always evolving, looking for fun stuff to do. And I think it's just rather, I remember Chris Costin, who, he had Spaghetti Factory or something like that way back when.
Yeah.
And he said he used to spend his days managing by wandering around. And I could wander around here all day.
Yeah.
And just, talk to and encourage people to do stuff. Try it. What do you need? We'll get it for you. Let's see what it looks like.
Yeah. Say yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Say yes.
And I think when people are encouraged like that, they actually feel like they're participating.
Yeah.
And they're no longer just an employee. And I think one of the things I go back to that just chagrined me so much was, front of house people would talk about getting stiffed by a table.
Yes.
And you just kind of go like, that is just such bad attitude.
Yeah.
And we just need to not be there.
Yeah.
And we need to find things that we can do, that we can play with people with. And so, our front of house staff, they're all encouraged to be bartenders as well as servers. And we want you to make cocktails, and we want you to try
learn
all
other
these different
skills.
things and like create stuff.
Yeah.
And be proud of what you create, and buy in.
Yeah, it gives them a sense
as a
of
result
ownership
of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
I think that's key to the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that is key. I mean, having them a part of the solution and respecting their ideas and involving them in it. And I think that's how anybody wants to have control of their own destiny and control of their own job and feel like they're a part of the bigger unit. And I think all those
and
points
I just I reiterate, the opportunities for us in Southern Vancouver Island are so immense.
Yeah.
I back in the late 80s, we took Marydale cider into Seattle when we opened some brew pubs there. And we couldn't give it away because nobody knew what cider was.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And you think about how Southern Vancouver Island has now evolved as a food region. And it's up to each of us where we are to support and encourage those people out there in the landscape to make cool stuff.
100%.
And for us, these are inputs. For them, that might be their life.
Yeah.
And by encouraging and developing and pursuing these things, we create a greater understanding of regionality, of where we live, of why this place is special, why we want to be here, why people want to come and visit us here, which drives the whole tourism economy and gives it reason to be. And Victoria is like chronically overseated in terms of restaurants, especially with no tourists.
Yeah.
So we just need to function understanding the reality of where we live. And at this point in time, I think we want to be supporting our landscape, creating cool stuff, and having people want to come and visit us and partake in what we're capable of doing.
For all the right reasons, too. It's
really
absolutely holistic approach.
Yeah, and I also hope that this conversation is wider than Greater Victoria. I think everything you said about Southern Vancouver Island and how it's special and that kind of unique culture for why the Bread and Butter Collective exists and everything like that is brilliant. But I'm keen to also make sure that it spreads over to Vancouver and to other parts of BC and other parts of Canada. So hopefully, as well as doing amazing stuff where you are, you can help inspire others to also do the same.
Oh, 100%. And even with the Bread and Butter Collective, we've had membership requests from outside of BC and outside of Vancouver Island, and we welcome it because I think information protected is information useless because until you can actually share it and expand it, all these ideas are just ideas. And like Paul was a Canadian-wide instigator of the craft brew industry. He led, and in this case he's leading again, and Cliff in his own way has led in all the things that he's done.
None of us do it on our own, like having a group to be able to bounce ideas off of. Even this conversation today, being able to have a conversation this in depth with a diverse group like this. And it's
Absolutely.
very helpful.
Yeah.
It's only
So many
missing the
parallels,
beer, Cliff. It's only missing the beer.
Yeah, if we had beer and out in the sun, that would then be epic. But I think that,
and I think with that, I think it's sometimes it's really great being a trailblazer. So Paul and Spinnakers can say they're the first living wage certified brewery in BC, and they can do that. It's also hard work, but where that trail is blazed, that then means that it's easier for others to also pick up, because they can see it can be done, and it's not too a difficult task because already one organization has done it, so therefore it can be done by others, and it also then makes it the norm for other businesses. And so it will, hopefully there'll be a time where, why are you not paying your staff a living wage, what's wrong with you, rather than kind of having to sort of do the hard work, which you're all doing at the moment. And I really appreciate the work you're doing to kind of work out, well, how do we actually make it happen?
yeah, I think together we're going to be able to figure out the right path. Not everybody's going to adopt it the same way, but the premise is as long as we're starting down the path, I think that's the first step.
Right.
And yeah, where the end, we don't know.
We do need to encourage people and inspire people. So how many coffee shops in BC are accredited right now? One?
Whoa.
Well, and
St. Vancouver?
that one actually, I know about it, but we haven't actually officially published it and announced it. So that'll be announced next week as the first living wage certified coffee shop.
There you go, Sam.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to be number 2, and
Exactly.
I
And
challenge.
they're not actually strictly speaking a shop. They're a cart.
Okay.
They're a sort of bit special. So you could be the first living wage certified coffee shop.
Okay,
And-
what about Burger Joint? What about Burger Joint?
I mean, unless you count Spinnakers, because they do great burgers.
They do great burgers,
good
but
burgers.
technically they're not a quick service. Paul, don't open a quick service burger joint in Victoria.
Well, we're working on it. We just keep hiring more staff to try to get the burgers out more quickly.
It's a never-ending battle,
man.
Paul. It's so impossible. You don't even want to try. Just give up. Oh, good. Okay, well, there we go. We're going to be the first burger joint in BC, and maybe the world.
I certainly challenge any coffee shop in BC to beat me.
Yeah.
My goal is
Any
July
quick
1st.
service restaurant, any Italian
Anyone
restaurant.
can beat me, I'll give you $20.
You know, we're
personally.
going to be racing Prima Strata because they're on the same program as we are. So
That's right.
I think we're going to have a multitude of restaurants in Southern Vancouver Island that are doing it, and we're going to all collaborate and figure out the best ways, and hopefully, in the next 2, 3, 4 years, it won't be an exception. It'll be the rule.
Yeah, it won't be just 2 crafty guys sitting across the table from us who are doing this in Victoria. I mean, it's going to be more, and the more the merrier.
Well, thank you all for your time. This has been
Thank
fantastic, great information, and we will follow up to see where everybody's at in the near future. And good luck with
Thank you for having me.
as we go into the Roaring 20s.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thanks so
Let's
much,
do it.
everyone.
Thank you.
You've
All
been
right.
great, Gus, and wow, I've learned a lot.
Anastasia will be in touch shortly with our program.
Do it.
Okay.
Thank
Love it.
you.
Thanks,
everyone.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Oh, Sam. That was
Calen,
good.
man.
Long awaited.
I'm still fired. I mean, I was fired up before I got into this, and I feel like I didn't have a chance to ask any of the questions that I really wanted to because, I mean, the conversation just went. And there's so much more
Totally.
to say, and there's so many more hurdles to acknowledge and pitfalls to avoid, and really there's a lot of really beneficial things to come out of this. I sent out an email the other day to all my suppliers.
Yeah.
The same email. And it's saying basically that, 2% Jazz is turning this new leaf.
Yeah.
We're treating our employees equitably. What are you doing
Yeah.
for your employees?
Yeah.
And how can we work together
Yeah.
and to promote each other and to help each other out?
Yeah.
And all my suppliers, I've heard back from 4.
And
I was surprised.
That's amazing.
I didn't think
Yeah.
I was going to hear back from
From
any
anybody.
of them.
Yeah.
And I heard back from 4, and they're all not in the food business like we
Yeah.
are, but they're suppliers, and they have the ability to pay a bit more in
Yeah.
some circumstances.
Yeah.
But now, for me, it's about trying to get my coffee and my green beans in at a living wage. So
Yes.
I'm doing a deep dive into what a living wage is in Nicaragua right now.
Well, and ensuring that the supply chain is I mean, it's one thing to do it yourself, but it's another thing to advocate and ensure the supply chain downstream is working hard at it as well.
Right. I mean, you can't just give your employees a living wage on the backs of other people who don't get them,
Listen, and this is the issue with the
crap.
tipping component of it, and the servitude that tipping brings in, and we talked about the inequality and sexism and racism around tipping. Those are real systemic issues with it. And when you have an industry that is reliant on the whims of the customer with respect to tipping for the large part, but we're left off the hook of actually figuring out a business that can be run profitably and pay our staff a living wage so that they can have dignity in work. And I think that it's twofold, right? I mean, the way it's been structured is broken. So now the way to fix it, and there'll always be an overcompensation to a degree, I think, but bringing in that balance where we're not expected to solve all the problems, but we have to contribute. And we've got to build a business model that can afford to pay our employees well. I mean, that's the one thing I always hear when we raise prices or things like that is people are like, well, why are we having to tip? Even when we did the auto gratuity, why am I expected to tip on takeout food? And it's a complicated question. I mean, typically we just figured our auto grat based on what our actual tip was from our customers. Right. So I think some customers are tipping 20% or 15%, and some were not tipping at all or tipping 5% or less, but we just blended the average. So the answer is people were tipping that amount before, but maybe you weren't, but now you're having to. So it's a very complicated structure that's been, but it's been to the detriment of our industry, I think. Tipping.
Tipping is one of those things that is, I like being in control of my tips, and I mean, I tip graciously, and I tip graciously even if the service isn't that good, which isn't.
Yeah, I don't even factor in the service, to be honest.
No, it's just part of the calculation when I go out now, and I've already spent my 20% before I walk in the door, and I know I have.
Yeah, and that's the same with me. And obviously, we're in the industry, so we understand a little bit about how it works. And we have to represent our industry well,
right?
When we're shopping in other places. But the idea that the tips are required for these people to actually make a living is an atrocity, and that's probably an extreme word, but it's sad that our industry is this way, and it's been this way forever.
And you look at other industries, and it's not like that.
None of them. There isn't another industry. It's all hospitality driven. I can't think of another industry that's relying on tips. Cabs, maybe.
But they're kind of transportation hospitality.
Yeah,
so
that is an extension.
Right?
Yeah, that's an extension. And same with hotels and housekeeping and things like that. That is another tip job. But I think, we're all responsible for how we want to live in our own industry. And, I think the movement's going to grow.
Yeah, over the course of the years, I've heard a couple of different ways to do this and to get there. And it feels like we had two really good examples today of both those models. One
integrates tips, and the other one
includes tips, the other doesn't.
Yeah.
And I wish we could have gotten more into the weeds about that, but time is what it is.
Well, time is, and I think it's really going to be. I mean, this is such early days in this, and I know Danny Meyer of New York was referenced in the Mise en Place podcast because he was one of the first big. He owns Shake Shack. He owns I think 6 or 7 other fine dining restaurants in New York, and he moved to a tip or removed tips completely. And he's since gone back. So, I think you need to have, I think there's a hybrid model, at least in the transition standpoint. So I think we're going to do a hybrid where we're going to do much like Paul's, where we are going to give people the option to tip. And we tip pool at Big Wheel already. So everybody, doesn't matter who you are.
And does that go on their paychecks?
It doesn't go on their paychecks, but I think moving forward, it will. I don't know. We're gonna have to.
I did that when COVID hit.
And you're still doing that.
And I'm still doing that, and I will continue to do that even with the.
And that's what Paul's doing too. And I think that is, for us, I think it is possible to do that along with the living wage.
It's an easier way in, I think, than the way Cliff has done is like full on, and
Well,
he's ahead of his time.
He's
Perhaps,
ahead
on
of his
this.
time, I think, and I think it's probably caused him a little bit more grief and a little more confusion on the customer standpoint as well. But I applaud him for the courage to do that. And,
Oh, yeah.
I think it's an obvious step to do a living wage and keep a tipping structure in the customer and back into the customer's hands, and we'll remove our autograt. But,
Okay.
the next step for us to get our head around is just where we're going to be pooling the tips and then taking deductions and all of that. Because as Paul said, I mean, cash, we still have a lot of people that pay in cash, but, trying to distribute cash
It's
and, it's dangerous
impossible.
and it's insane. Like when you
Yeah.
think about what we're doing, having to go to the bank and would take out, 5,000 to 6,000 to cover gratuities each week or whatever it is
It's
madness.
It's madness.
actually.
It's a pain in the ass. When we
Yeah.
moved to the inclusion on paychecks, there was a little bit of grumbling, but not really that much.
Yeah.
I've got great staff, and they understood that some of the staff were going to get tips for the first time because
Yeah, that's right.
they were the management before, and
Yeah.
now we're just all working the front line.
That's right.
So everyone gets it, and we did it 50-50, which I can see why Paul's doing, I think, a 65-35 split or maybe a 60-40
Oh,
split.
from front and back?
I
Yeah.
think so. There
Yeah.
there is a split. It's not 50-50,
Yeah.
and I think they came to that because it worked better for them. But they're
Yeah.
a traditional front of house, back house kind of
Yeah.
place where I'm not.
Well,
right?
and that's like Zambries, where we did a modification of our tip structure, increased the tip out, but we let the servers keep the booze part of it, servers and
okay.
bartenders, and then but equalize the food component because obviously you have kitchen spends all their time and energy making the food. The server has to sell the food and deliver the food and deal with customers on that front. So I think that is a good area of compromise where you can let the servers get the booze tip portion, and then split the food portion evenly, which is another way to look at it. But
For sure. Oh man, this whole thing just makes me love the fact that we're part of the Bread and Butter Collective.
oh my God,
And it makes me want every one of our members, which we're going to read out in short order here, but I want them, I'd love it for them all to be doing this because then it'd be easy just to say, okay, Joe Q Public, this is the places to go.
Yes, 100%.
Like right now, I want to tell everyone to go to Spinnaker's for a beer and go to Philadelphia for your bread. I mean,
Yeah,
why
100%.
wouldn't we want to support
and
that?
Agrius
Yeah,
is
it's,
for sure.
It's amazing what people are doing out there, and I really hope that more of us jump on board. This is important.
For sure. Well, I'll start off with 2%
Okay.
Jazz Coffee. You always take the front run there.
That's because I
Sam.
like saying my own name.
I know, but listen, I want to say my name, Big
Fair
Will, so I
enough.
want that in there too. Oh, so we got 2% coffee, 2% Jazz Coffee. We got 900 degree wood fired pizzeria. We've got Agrius. We've got Bodega Tapa Wine Bar. We've got Big Wheel Burger. We've got Nourish, Charlotte the Quail, Drum Roaster Coffee, Habit Coffee, Foo, Culinary Kitchen, Classroom at Camosun College, Cafe Fantastico, Folepi. That's one of Cliff's businesses as well. Herald Street Brewworks, Hey Happy.
The House of Botang, Hoyne Brewery, La Pasta, the Rue Patisserie, the Mocha House, Part and Parcel, Poca, Prima Strada, sorry.
Poco.
Oh, am I saying? Oh man, I'm sorry. I can't read. I don't have my glasses on. Prima Strada, Roast, Table 9, and Sherwood Cafe and Bar, and the Drake and Tapa Bar, and the Taco Stand El Pastor, Took, and the Wienery. Thanks for letting me say the Wienery today. And Zambries. And those are all the great places in town to go eat and drink, aren't they?
They are. You
They
can
really
check
are.
out our podcast at thebreadandbuttercollective.com/podcast. Also on Check TV, Check News. And you can see the visual on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
So if you go to
us.
breadandbuttercollective.com, click on the YouTube icon, and you can actually see the episodes.
Yeah, you can see
So-
if we meet your expectations.
We won't. You won't.
We
Yeah,
won't.
we won't.
No, well,
We
I
won't. We
won't.
won't.
You
Yeah.
might. You're looking good today.
Oh, thank you.
On
Only
your
because of
beautiful orange shirt.
My orange shirt. That is the key for my look today. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Be safe. Be kind.
Yeah, be real nice to everybody.
And we'll see you next week.
Pay your staff well.
Pay your staff. Living wage.